The Wraith's design never made sense to me. On one hand, we have an amazing monster with a mood and bark face mask, tribal symbols as add-ons, and a power to become invisible by ringing a magic bell. But on the other hand, we have the lore, a dude that came to America in order to work in a car wrecker that was actually a cover-up operation to get rid of people by the mafia. If you think about it for more than 1 second, you will see that something is wrong. There is absolutely nothing on Wraith's design and gameplay that suggests he was a part of the Autohaven realm. Trapper was a miner who uses bear traps, and so he has Macmillan. Hillbilly was a disfigured farmer that uses a chainsaw, and so he has a farm. Wraith? Well, what is Wraith exactly? This led me to a theory that I made months ago. A theory that at the time, I just left like that and I didn't look much into it. In that theory, I suggested that Wraith did not belong to Autohaven, but another killer was. And turns out, I was right. Not only did I confirm that the Wraith belonged to another realm, but we also know from what realm he is from, which explains why he has such a visual dissonance with Autohaven. So let's answer first the question, what was Wraith's original realm? I know most of you are going to say that the swamp is the Wraith's original realm just by visual design, but the swamp already belongs to the Hag, and it was a DLC, so is it actually the swamp? Well, it is. The swamp was Wraith's original map, but how can that be? Well, as we know, the game released on June 2016 with 3 different realms and killers. Those were Macmillan for Trapper, Coldwind for Hillbilly, and Autohaven for Wraith. But the swamp already existed both in the game files of the beta and also in the Dead by Daylight art book. If you take a look at the art book concept art of Dead by Daylight, you will see that 2 artworks are actually from the swamp map. The first one is the bait shop, which also showcases the crawler, who would end up becoming the Hag. The second picture is of the boat that we know today as the Pale Rose, and if you take a look at the character drawn in this boat, it's none other than the Wraith. But that is not the only concept art we have of the swamp. There exist 3 more of the swamp that are very hard to find online, but here they are. The first one is of the village map that was scrapped from development. Nothing is special here, I just wanted to show you the image. But the second one is the key thing here. It's a picture of some place in the swamp, with the main component being the Wraith in the middle. Finally, the third image shows Jake looking at the Wraith in the distance while he is performing a Mori. In all of these pictures, what we find in common is that the Wraith appears on a swamp in all of them. And guess what? This is actually directly confirmed by the developers. Roll the clip.
The Wraith in the background, interesting story. The swamp was originally owned to the Wraith.
It's true.
Yeah, but then swamp could not have been released in the original offering, so the Wraith was moved, lore and everything, to the junkyard.
Sometimes these things happen quite fast.
Yeah, but then we're like, oh, okay, let's change everything.
Yeah.
Next.
As you could hear, the swamp belonged to the Wraith, but on the last second, due to time constraints, they could not release it on time, so they decided to give Autohaven to Wraith. But this raises more questions. If the swamp belonged to the Wraith from the start, then who was the killer that belonged in Autohaven? And what about the crawler? And what was Wraith's original lore? Well, let's talk about that. Who was the killer from Autohaven? Ask any hacker in the world, search how much you want to search on the Dead by Daylight wiki, you will not find any evidence of a killer that was scrapped from the game or any 4th killer that we never got on launch. The closest we have is the Smasher, but he was scrapped very early in development. But the reason you don't find any scrapped characters is because you search from inside Dead by Daylight in the deepest data mines, when the answer was in front of you from the start. Most of video games create promotional art in order to showcase how the game feels. Most of you have seen this image over here, as it's one of the most popular artworks of Dead by Daylight. But the key here is in the second promotional art that they showed, and the answer lies right in front of you. The character that is about to hook this beta Dwight is actually not Michael Myers. To those of you that watched my original video, you already met him. But for those that have never watched the first video and are watching this for the first time, say hello to Bob. We don't know much about this character, other than the name. And we know the name because in October 27th, 2016, Dave Richards said that the name of this killer is Bob. Now, most people will take it as a joke, and that's it, because of the tweet before. But the name Bob is not just a random guess, because actually Bob is part of the game files as a remnant of one of Wraith's files. With this new information that we know, and with the fact that Bob is actually on the game files as part of Wraith, then we have the answer in front of us. A killer, codenamed Bob, was part of Autohaven, and he was supposed to be a parody of Michael Myers, just like Trapper is a Jason parody, and Hillbilly a Leatherface one. However, since they got the actual license for the Halloween DLC, and the swamp maps weren't finished, they decided to completely replace Bob, and change the entire lore of the Wraith so it fits. But what about the Hag and the Crawler? Well, now that we know for a fact that Wraith was the killer for the swamp, that means that they had a perfectly fine realm to use, but they needed a killer. So they got inspired by the Crawler from the bait shop, and they created the Hag. I also know this because the Hag's power was not added after Michael Myers was finished, since I got access to a developer build that had an unfinished Halloween DLC. So that means that sadly, my Crawler theory was wrong. So now that I answered that question for you, you probably have another question that needs to be resolved. What was Wraith's original lore? If the Wraith belonged to the swamp, that means he had a completely different lore. And this also means that this weapon was never intended to be his boss Azaroth. So what is the Wraith's lore? This is by far the hardest research I have had to do, but I believe I know the answer. The lore of the Wraith cannot be found in a single spot. Instead, in order to uncover it, we have to find different pieces of the puzzle, each one belonging in a completely different spot than the other. So let's start with the piece of the puzzle that you have in front of your eyes right now. The Wraith's original lore can be found in this screen right here. You might be thinking that this is just the current lore of the Wraith, but that's not where I want you to look at. Instead, take a look at the Wraith's perks. As you know, the perks in Dead by Daylight most of the times are heavily linked with the lore of the killer. For example, let's take a look at Wesker's perk and how they represent how he believes he's a superior to every human being, how his Ouroboros virus has improved his senses, and how even when it looks like Wesker is losing, he still has everything under control. So what do Wraith's perks represent? Well, the only thing in common they have, other than that they are trash, is that they represent how the Wraith is an expert hunter, capable of tracking its prey with his ability to detect footprints, smell blood, and his increased senses that allow him to see better in the swamp or forest, the places where Wraith was supposed to hunt. Think about it logically. While we know that the Wraith's lore was retconned to fit Autohaven, there is no chance Behaviour could also retcon the perks in order to fit him better. Because of that, Wraith's perks is one of the remnants of the past that we have about him, and one piece of the puzzle. So now we have the fact that the Wraith was originally a hunter, but that's about it. We can technically say that most of the killers in DBD are hunters, and that's just way too ambiguous and unsatisfying. What was Wraith hunting? Why he was hunting? How did everything start? This is something that took me a long time to find the answer to, but I believe I have an idea as to why. And this is not found in the game. In order to answer the question as to what and why, we have to take a look at real life. We know that Behaviour takes heavy inspiration from real life stuff in order to create their survivors and killers. So maybe the answer to this question is found in the inspiration for the Wraith. But what is the inspiration? Well, Wraith has two real life characters that he takes inspiration from. and the first one is literally named in the game, Predator. Think about it. The Wraith is a killer that hunts people and takes their skeletons as their prize, just like Predator. The Wraith can turn invisible to stalk and hunt his prey, just like the Predator. The Wraith is found in heavily dense forest-like swamps, just like the Predator is in the jungles. Wraith is the most alien character in Dead by Daylight originally, and we know that the original killers of DBD were inspired on popular media horror icons. Even the entity is inspired by the deadlights of It. While it is debatable that the Predator is a horror icon, he is a very popular icon either way in pop culture, and the similarities are way too many for this to be just coincidences. But his visual design is taken from something completely different. The Wraith's visual design is inspired by the Noiz. Take a look at this comparison and tell me that it's another coincidence. You can see the mud and chalk drawing around his body, the tribal inspiration that Wraith has, and even his glowy eyes as well. Even the pose is the same. The Noiz was a hero from the Navajo mythology that hunted monsters, as his name is literally Monster Slayer, and that fits with the Proto-Wraith lore that we have with these two puzzle pieces. However, if you read the Noiz lore, you might see that there is a problem. The Noiz was a hero. He did not hunt people, he hunted monsters. The Wraith in the game hunts innocent people. But there is a simple answer to this actually that makes a lot of sense. Way too much. To the point, I believe this is exactly what the developers intended. The theory of the white eyes. If you take a look at all the killers in Dead by Daylight, you will see that some of them have a common trait, the type of eyes they have. There are killers with no alterations to their eyes like Trapper, Trickster or Wesker. There are killers like Clown, Huntress or Hag that have black, pitch black eyes. And then we have Wraith, Spirit and Deathslinger, and these killers have white eyes. The theory of the white eyes comes from the fact that the entity is manipulating these killers in order to see something to trick them into submission. In the case of Spirit, she sees every survivor as her father, the person that caused all of this on the first place. For Deathslinger, he sees them as his enemies, the people that wronged him and did him wrong. And for the Wraith, what if the entity is manipulating him into seeing the survivors like monsters or prey that he is supposed to hunt? But of course, that is just a theory. But I thought it would be fun to include in this video just to further prove my evidence. But even with all of this, there is one question I always had about the Wraith that I never understood. A design choice that I always felt like it was very odd. Why does the Wraith have bark on his head? A lot of people might not even care that he has wood on his head. Most of you will simply say that it's a stylistic choice and that's it. But that's not the case at all. Wood seems to be a very crucial part to Wraith's visual design. In fact, if you check the store, you can see that the Wraith has various outfits that are inspired on wood, and the most important one is his blighted outfit. Blighted outfits are supposed to exaggerate the original qualities of killers in order to make them monstrous. For example, the Trapper becomes more spiked and his mask more brutal. The Huntress grows fur and has organic eyes in the mask. And the Wraith becomes a wooden monster. His head is replaced by bark completely and his entire body is filled with branches. It's as if the Wraith was not supposed to be a human, but a wooden monster. I could not find the answer for this in Dead by Daylight. No lore entry, nor archives entry, no cosmetic description or add-on that could answer my question. But that was because I was looking for answers inside Dead by Daylight. To find the answer, I had to think outside
the box.
What if I told you that the first collaboration ever that Behaviour did was not the Halloween DLC? They collaborated with another game before Dead by Daylight was even released. The first collab was Payday 2. If you bought Dead by Daylight or you had the special edition, you would receive 7 different masks in Payday that are inspired by Dead by Daylight. We have the Crawler, Blisterhead, the Devourer, the Unborn, the Feeder, and the Killer, which was clearly Trapper. It even had a different design compared to the others. Now, if you look at these masks, you might see something interesting. These masks don't have that Dead by Daylight feel that the game has now. In fact, some of the killers in Payday, like the Clawer, do not fit DBD at all. And there is a reason for that. The only mask that was officially made by Behaviour is the Trapper. The rest of the masks were made by Starbreeze Studios, the developer of Payday 2, and this was confirmed by Dave Richards. But if you really paid attention to my words, you would have noticed that I said that there are 7 masks, and I only showed 6 of them. This is because the 7th mask is the most important for this video. Let me present to you Dendron. One glance at Dendron and it's clear who this mask was inspired by. This is the Wraith's original design or description that was brought to life by Starbreeze Studios. In fact, Dendron, I would say, is a prototype of Wraith, as he possibly existed before Wraith's design was solidified. And what is especially interesting is the description of Dendron. According to the Payday mask, it says this: "A dark forest is scary to anyone, no matter how old you are. You fear whatever is in it and the things lurking in the shadows, but you seldom think of the actual trees. You never think of Dendron, and when you do, it's already too late. Dendron strikes without mercy, so fear not what's behind the trees, but instead the trees." And this lore confirms my suspicions. The Wraith was originally a wooden monster, a wood creature that hunted in the woods. In fact, this is literally his lore in one of his cosmetics that were released as a part of the first Rift ever. So, how do we connect these pieces of the puzzle? How do we connect a hunter inspired in the Navajo mythology to a wooden monster? What was his motivation to hunt? And I believe I know the answer to that as well. The answer is found in the Bloodwillow Tree. For those of you that don't know, the Bloodwillow Tree was a landmark that was supposed to be in the Swamp Realm on a specific map. It was a massive tree, bigger than any tree in the game, and no, it was not supposed to be the Shelter Woods tree. The Bloodwillow Tree was only found in the now scrapped village map of the swamp. But it didn't play a big role on the map. How do I actually know that the tree is called Bloodwillow? The answer is found in the Dead by Daylight official artbook. As you can see on this page, we see the same tree with red in the roots, with the same name. And that tree is found in the village map, is actually called the Bloodwillow in the files of the beta version of the game. Normally, the landmarks in maps represent something from the map itself, either decoration or they are key parts of the lore. The Bloodwillow Tree appears on the same page as the hatch and the hooks, and it even has a unique name, making it seem like there is something very important about it. It would also explain why this tree never returned to the game, since if my theory is right, that means that it was connected to the Wraith, and now that Wraith is on Autohaven, this tree has lost its main meaning of existence. It is possible that Wraith was born from this tree or influenced in some way. It is possible that Wraith hunted any human or animal that ventured too far inside the swamp, or he needed their sacrifice in order to keep the tree alive. It is even possible that the entity corrupted this tree. So based on all the evidence that can be found in the files, in the concept art, and by joining all of the pieces of the puzzle, we have this. The Wraith was a wooden man inspired in Navajo mythology and predator, who would hunt people that ventured inside the swamp or animals and sacrifice them to the Bloodwillow Tree. Behaviour got the license for Michael Myers, so they had to remove Bob from the game. Now that they had a fully finished map but no killer, and a killer but no unfinished map, and with the time constraints they had, they decided to combine the two and give the Wraith a quick lore to make him fit in Autohaven, without changing his visual design, his power, his perks, and his add-ons. This is my theory for the Wraith. If any behavior developer is watching this video, please tell me I am right so I can retire from my channel. And if you enjoyed this video, you are going to enjoy my other videos too. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.